Hillary Clinton was on stage at a high-profile political forum, speaking to a packed audience. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and the energy in the room was charged with tension. In the middle of her speech, Clinton took a sharp jab at Senator John Kennedy. With a smirk, she mocked him, calling him nothing more than a dumb hillbilly. The crowd gasped, and whispers rippled through the hall. It was the kind of insult designed to humiliate, and for a brief moment, Kennedy sat in silence. Then he rose from his seat with calm, deliberate steps and walked to the microphone. His face showed no anger, only quiet confidence. "Madam Secretary," he began, his voice steady and measured, "I may talk a little slower, I may not come from the same background as you, but let me remind you of something. This country was not built by people who looked down on others. It was built by folks who got up every day, worked with their hands, fought for their families, and believed in freedom." The room went completely silent. He leaned closer to the mic, "So if being a so-called hillbilly means standing with the hard-working men and women of this country, then I will wear that name proudly. Because those are the people I serve, and those are the people who built America." His words hit like a hammer, echoing through the chamber. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some stood to their feet, and even a few reporters seemed stunned by the conviction in his tone. Clinton, caught off guard, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of her reaction as Kennedy finished with a line that went viral within minutes: "Insults may win headlines, but respect wins the heart of the nation." By the end of the night, Kennedy's response was being replayed across television networks and trending online. Commentators called it one of the most powerful moments of his career. Clinton's jab, intended to belittle him, had instead handed him the spotlight. America was left buzzing, stunned not by the insult, but by the way Kennedy turned it into a defining moment of strength. The fallout from that moment was immediate. Within hours, clips of John Kennedy's reply were circulating on every major news outlet. Talk shows replayed his words on loop, dissecting the tone, the timing, and the sheer impact of what he had said. Commentators who were usually divided along party lines found themselves in rare agreement: Kennedy had delivered a masterstroke. On social media, hashtags praising Kennedy shot to the top of trending lists. Memes flooded timelines, with people quoting his line about respect winning the heart of the nation. Ordinary Americans, farmers, teachers, veterans, small business owners, started posting videos thanking him for standing up for people who often felt ignored by Washington elites. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton's camp scrambled. What was meant as a sharp put-down had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making Kennedy look foolish, her words painted her as dismissive and arrogant. Reporters swarmed her staff with questions, but the only response they could muster was a curt, "No comment." Kennedy, however, didn't let the moment pass. The very next morning, he appeared on a popular morning news show. Sitting calmly in the studio, he looked straight into the camera and said, "This country doesn't need more insults from the top, it needs leaders who will roll up their sleeves and remember who they serve. Every American matters, no matter their accent, their hometown, or their paycheck." The audience applauded in the studio, and once again, the clip went viral. Kennedy had seized control of the narrative, and for the first time in a long while, the spotlight was fully on him. The political storm only grew stronger as the week unfolded. Kennedy's words weren't just being replayed, they were being studied. College debate teams analyzed his response, leadership podcasts praised his composure, and even late-night comedians admitted he had turned the tables in a way no one expected. Back in Washington, whispers filled the corridors of power. Senators and representatives who had often overlooked Kennedy began to see him differently. He wasn't just the folksy lawmaker with a sharp wit, he was suddenly a voice that could capture the nation's attention. Lobbyists, journalists, and political strategists all wanted a piece of him. Clinton, on the other hand, was noticeably quieter. For someone who had once dominated the stage with forceful rhetoric, she now faced criticism for being out of touch. Editorials called her remark careless, even condescending. One newspaper ran the headline, "Clinton's insult, Kennedy's triumph." But Kennedy didn't gloat. Instead, he doubled down on his message. At a rally in his home state, he stood before thousands of supporters waving signs and chanting his name. He told the crowd, "You know, folks, some people in politics think they're too smart to listen. They think they know better than the rest of us. But let me tell you something, no one is too important to hear the voices of the people who put them in office. My job isn't to sound clever. My job is to serve you." The crowd roared, and chants of "Kennedy! Kennedy!" echoed through the night. For many, it was more than just a rally, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. The momentum was impossible to ignore. Within days, Kennedy's name was dominating headlines. Political analysts who once brushed him off as a background figure were now debating whether he had the charisma to shift the balance of power in Washington. His approval ratings spiked, climbing higher with every poll released. Clinton's allies tried to control the damage. A spokesperson appeared on several networks, insisting that her words had been taken out of context. But the attempt fell flat. The raw footage of her smirk and the audience's gasp was already burned into the public's memory. No spin could erase it. Meanwhile, Kennedy seemed almost untouched by the chaos swirling around him. Reporters followed him everywhere, eager for his next statement. At one press conference, a journalist asked if he felt personally offended by Clinton's insult. Kennedy smiled slightly and replied, "Offended? No. Motivated? Absolutely. If someone wants to laugh at where I come from, that's fine. Because where I come from is America's backbone. And I'd rather stand with those people any day." That line became another viral sensation. It appeared on T-shirts, posters, and even bumper stickers within a week. Grassroots groups started organizing online, declaring that Kennedy had given them a voice against elitism. Behind closed doors, however, party leaders were growing nervous. Kennedy's sudden rise wasn't just embarrassing Clinton, it was shaking the establishment. He was winning the hearts of ordinary Americans in a way polished politicians had failed to do for years. And if his momentum continued, he might become more than a momentary headline. He could become a movement. In Washington's back rooms, the atmosphere grew tense. Party strategists, donors, and high-ranking officials gathered in private meetings to discuss what they now called the Kennedy problem. It wasn't just about Hillary Clinton's embarrassment anymore, it was about a shift in momentum that no one had seen coming. "He's turning into a symbol," one strategist warned during a closed-door session. "People aren't just cheering for Kennedy, they're cheering against us. If this keeps going, we lose control of the narrative." Meanwhile, Kennedy's calendar was filling faster than ever. Invitations poured in from across the country, community town halls, university panels, farmers' associations, even veteran groups. Everywhere he went, the turnout grew larger. At each stop, Kennedy repeated a variation of his message: "Politics isn't about titles. It's about trust. And I trust the people who built this country with their hands and their hearts." The more he spoke, the more people connected with him. His plain-spoken style wasn't seen as simple, it was seen as authentic. Clinton, however, began to push back. In a televised interview, she tried to reframe the issue: "This country doesn't need folksy slogans, it needs serious solutions. Senator Kennedy may be charming, but charm doesn't solve problems." But instead of weakening him, her words only fueled the divide. Commentators pointed out the irony, that Kennedy's so-called folksy slogans were resonating more than the carefully crafted talking points of career politicians. By the end of the week, Kennedy wasn't just a senator from Louisiana, he was becoming the unlikely figurehead of a growing movement. And that scared the establishment more than anything else. The establishment moved quickly. Kennedy's rising influence couldn't be ignored, and behind the scenes, efforts were made to chip away at his growing popularity. Suddenly, stories began appearing in major newspapers questioning his background, his record, even twisting harmless quotes into supposed controversies. "Too unsophisticated for national leadership," one headline read. Another editorial sneered, "Kennedy's charm won't last once the public realizes he's all talk." But the people weren't buying it. At a packed rally in the Midwest, Kennedy addressed the attacks head-on. Standing before thousands waving homemade signs, he didn't flinch. "They think if they throw enough mud, some of it will stick," he said, his voice carrying over the roaring crowd. "But here's the truth, mud only sticks if you let it. And I'm not here to fight with insiders. I'm here to fight for you." The crowd erupted in cheers. Chants of "Kennedy! Kennedy!" drowned out the music, the noise so thunderous that local reporters described it as an earthquake of support. Meanwhile, Clinton grew increasingly frustrated. What was supposed to be a clever put-down had spiraled into a national crisis for her image. Her advisors pushed her to reclaim control, but every attempt seemed to backfire. Each time she spoke, Kennedy's words overshadowed hers. Cable news began calling it the Kennedy Surge, and polls showed him outpacing some of the most established names in politics. The harder they tried to bring him down, the higher he climbed. For the first time, insiders began whispering a question they had never considered seriously before: could John Kennedy actually become a national contender? The pressure finally boiled over when Kennedy and Clinton were scheduled to appear on the same stage at a nationally televised political forum. Millions tuned in, curious to see whether Clinton would try to recover her footing, or if Kennedy would deliver another viral moment. The auditorium was electric. The moderators introduced both figures, and the crowd's reaction said everything. Clinton received polite applause. But when Kennedy's name was called, the audience erupted into cheers that shook the hall. Clinton's forced smile couldn't hide her discomfort. From the start, the moderators pressed the issue. "Senator Kennedy," one asked, "do you believe Secretary Clinton's remark reflects how many in Washington view ordinary Americans?" Kennedy didn't hesitate. "I think too many in Washington forget that their power comes from the people, not the other way around," he replied calmly. "When folks in this country are dismissed or mocked, it doesn't weaken them, it strengthens their resolve. If you insult where I come from, you insult millions of Americans who work hard, pay taxes, and love their families. And I'll never apologize for standing with them." The audience roared, and cameras cut to Clinton. She tried to interrupt, insisting, "This isn't about feelings, it's about qualifications." But Kennedy turned to her directly and said, "Respect is a qualification, Madam Secretary. Without it, all the policy papers in the world don't mean a thing." Gasps filled the room. Commentators later said that was the exact moment the debate shifted. Kennedy had not only defended himself, he had redefined the argument. By the time the event ended, hashtags like #respect is a qualification were trending nationwide. Kennedy's words weren't just a response anymore, they were becoming a rallying cry. Kennedy's words from the forum didn't just echo for a night, they ignited something much larger. Within days, his phrase, "respect is a qualification," was plastered across posters, T-shirts, and social media banners. Grassroots organizers seized the moment, forming volunteer groups in cities and towns across the nation. Small businesses began displaying signs with Kennedy's quote. Farmers, teachers, and veterans sent in video testimonials praising his courage. College students, often disengaged from politics, started sharing clips of his speeches, calling him the first politician who actually sounds real. News networks scrambled to cover the phenomenon. Some tried to dismiss it as a temporary wave of emotion, but others admitted it was unlike anything they had seen in years. Kennedy was no longer just responding to Clinton, he was reshaping the political landscape itself. Clinton's allies, alarmed, launched new ads portraying Kennedy as unpolished and inexperienced. But these attempts only made things worse. People mocked the ads online, pointing out that being unpolished was exactly what made him authentic. One viral comment summed it up: "We don't need polished speeches, we need honest leaders." Behind closed doors, party leaders grew restless. Kennedy was now drawing bigger crowds than many frontrunners, and his approval numbers were climbing week after week. What started as a single sharp comeback had turned into a nationwide movement. For Kennedy, it was a surreal moment. In private, he admitted to his closest advisors that he never expected a single exchange with Clinton to spark such a firestorm. But in public, he leaned into it. "This isn't about me," he told a rally of 20,000 supporters. "This is about you. This is about every American who has ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or talked down to. We're not just here to be heard, we're here to be respected." The crowd's roar shook the arena. It was no longer a question of whether Kennedy could handle the spotlight, it was whether the political establishment could handle him. By now, Kennedy wasn't just a rising voice, he was a force the establishment couldn't ignore. His movement had become so large that even networks that once dismissed him as a regional figure were inviting him onto primetime shows. Every appearance turned into a ratings surge, and every word he spoke seemed to carry more weight. Clinton, stung by her earlier miscalculation, agreed to face him directly in a nationally televised debate. The build-up was enormous. Pundits framed it as Clinton's redemption or Kennedy's coronation. Millions tuned in, waiting to see who would dominate the stage. From the opening statement, Kennedy's calm confidence contrasted sharply with Clinton's sharp, defensive tone. She accused him of oversimplifying issues with folksy rhetoric. Kennedy smiled slightly and replied, "Well, Madam Secretary, maybe the reason folks connect with me is because I'm speaking their language, not Washington's." The crowd erupted, and the moderators struggled to regain control. At one point, Clinton pressed him on foreign policy, sneering, "Do you really think someone with your background can handle the complexities of international leadership?" Kennedy didn't blink. He leaned toward the microphone and said, "If respecting the American people is considered a weakness, then I'll gladly be weak. But if listening, learning, and leading with humility are what you call inexperience, then maybe that's exactly the kind of experience Washington needs." The audience gasped, then exploded into cheers. Commentators instantly declared it the line of the night. Afterward, even critics who disagreed with Kennedy admitted that his composure and authenticity had shifted the momentum of the debate. Social media once again lit up, with hashtag language of the people trending alongside hashtag respect is a qualification. The establishment had tried to corner him on the national stage, but instead, Kennedy walked away stronger than ever. What followed after the debate was nothing short of extraordinary. Kennedy's campaign office, once a modest operation, was now flooded with volunteers and donations from across the nation. Retirees sent in $5 checks with handwritten notes. College students organized campus rallies without being asked. Truck drivers, factory workers, and small-town families began putting up homemade signs declaring, "Respect is a qualification." The media couldn't keep up with the movement. Networks that once gave him a few minutes of coverage were now dedicating entire segments to the Kennedy phenomenon. One commentator summed it up, "This isn't just a spark anymore, it's a wildfire." Meanwhile, Clinton's attempts to regain control kept falling flat. Every new speech she gave seemed rehearsed and hollow compared to Kennedy's straightforward delivery. At one event, she tried to paint him as dangerously inexperienced, but headlines the next day focused only on the thunderous applause Kennedy received when he replied, "Maybe Washington has too much experience doing the wrong things." Behind the scenes, party elites grew anxious. Kennedy's approval ratings had soared to levels they hadn't anticipated. Focus groups showed ordinary Americans felt he spoke for them in a way no one else did. More troubling for the insiders, some of their own members began quietly suggesting Kennedy could become the face of a new political future. In less than 2 months, what started as a sharp comeback on stage had transformed into a movement too big to dismiss. Kennedy wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was leading a political revolution that threatened to rewrite the rules of Washington. And for the first time in years, the establishment felt the ground shifting beneath their feet. The establishment knew they were running out of time. Kennedy's rise had been faster and stronger than anyone anticipated, and now his message was breaking through barriers no one thought possible. Desperate, Washington insiders launched a coordinated counterattack. Suddenly, major outlets ran investigative pieces questioning Kennedy's past. Old college essays were dug up, harmless comments were twisted into controversy, and pundits filled panels with grim warnings about the danger of populist rhetoric. Behind the scenes, donors funneled millions into attack ads designed to paint him as reckless, unprepared, and even untrustworthy. But once again, the effort backfired. Ordinary Americans didn't see a scandal, they saw fear. Kennedy's supporters took to social media, blasting the coordinated smears as proof that the establishment was terrified of him. If they're trying this hard to shut him up, one viral post read, it means he must be telling the truth. At a town hall in Texas, Kennedy addressed the onslaught directly. Standing before a packed gymnasium, he looked into the cameras and said, "You've seen the headlines, you've heard the attacks. But let me ask you this, why are they spending all this time and money trying to tear down one senator from Louisiana? I'll tell you why. Because I'm not for sale. Because I won't bow down. And because I refuse to stop speaking for the people who built this country." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, chanting his name so loudly that reporters said it shook the walls. Clips of the speech went viral overnight, cementing Kennedy's reputation as a fighter who couldn't be silenced. For the establishment, it was the nightmare scenario. The more they tried to destroy him, the stronger he became. And for Hillary Clinton, it meant one thing: what was supposed to be her triumphant return to the spotlight had instead birthed her most dangerous rival yet. By now, Kennedy had grown tired of playing defense. The smear campaigns, the headlines, the coordinated attacks, it was clear the establishment would never stop coming for him. So, instead of dodging their blows, he flipped the script. In a primetime interview, watched by millions, Kennedy looked directly into the camera and said, "Let's be honest. Washington is broken. Too many folks here care more about their careers than the country. That's why they attack me, because I won't play their game. But I've got news for them, I'm not here to join their club. I'm here to break it wide open." The line sent shockwaves across the nation. Supporters erupted with excitement, while critics scrambled to respond. Kennedy wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was openly challenging the system that Clinton and others had spent decades building. Soon after, he announced a series of town halls across battleground states, branding the tour the Respect Road. Each stop drew record-breaking crowds. Farmers stood shoulder to shoulder with students, factory workers with business owners, veterans with teachers, all united under a single chant: respect. 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 Meanwhile, Clinton's frustration boiled over. In an unguarded moment caught on a hot mic, she was overheard complaining, "This man is a political sideshow, yet people are treating him like a savior." The clip spread online within hours, reinforcing the very image of elitism Kennedy had been exposing. At the next rally, Kennedy seized on it. With a wry smile, he told the crowd, "They call you a sideshow. Well, if standing up for ordinary Americans is a sideshow, then I'll proudly be the main attraction." The crowd exploded, chanting his name as camera crews captured the moment. It was undeniable now, Kennedy wasn't just a senator making noise. He was the face of a growing revolution, and Washington had no idea how to stop it. The stage was set for a showdown unlike any before. A nationally televised town hall was announced, featuring both Hillary Clinton and John Kennedy, seated side by side in front of a live audience. Millions tuned in, knowing this wasn't just another debate, it was a test of who truly held the people's trust. Clinton came prepared with stacks of notes and polished talking points. Kennedy walked in with nothing but his usual confidence and a thin folder. From the very first question, the contrast was clear. Clinton delivered long, complex answers filled with policy jargon. Kennedy, in his plain-spoken way, cut straight to the heart of the issues. At one point, Clinton turned sharply toward him and said, "Senator Kennedy, charm might win applause, but it doesn't pay the bills. People need leaders with knowledge, not slogans." The room went still. Kennedy leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "Madam Secretary, let me tell you something. Folks don't sit around their kitchen tables at night asking for complicated lectures. They want leaders who will fight for them, not talk down to them. Respect isn't a slogan, it's survival. And if Washington can't understand that, then Washington needs to change. The audience gasped, then erupted in cheers so loud the moderator struggled to regain order. Cameras zoomed in on Clinton, her expression tight as Kennedy's words echoed across the hall. Then came the moment that froze the nation. A young woman from the audience stood up and asked Clinton directly, "Do you respect people like me, people who didn't go to elite schools, who work 2 jobs just to get by?" Clinton hesitated, fumbling for words. Kennedy, without waiting for the moderator, turned to the young woman and said, "I do. And I always will. Because people like you are the reason this country is still standing." The crowd erupted again, many on their feet. Social media exploded instantly. Commentators declared it a knockout moment, the kind that could define not just a debate, but an entire movement. Clinton had hoped to corner Kennedy. Instead, she had given him the platform to deliver the line that would seal his place in political history. The fallout from the town hall was immediate and seismic. Kennedy's closing words to the young woman, simple, heartfelt, and unpolished, spread across the nation like wildfire. News outlets replayed the clip on a loop. Commentators declared it the moment America fell in love with John Kennedy. Hashtags like #IRespectYou and #KennedyMovement trended for days. Clinton, meanwhile, faced a media firestorm. Her hesitation and polished evasions were dissected endlessly, framed as proof she had lost touch with ordinary Americans. Editorials called her response cold, detached, and career-ending. What was meant to be her stage of redemption had instead turned into Kennedy's coronation. Kennedy, however, didn't gloat. In his victory speech the next morning, he kept the focus on the people, not himself. "This isn't about me," he told a sea of cheering supporters. "It's about every American who deserves respect, whether you wear a suit in an office, boots on a farm, or a uniform on the battlefield. Respect isn't a luxury. It's a right. And together, we're going to make sure Washington never forgets it again." The applause was deafening. Supporters wept, waved flags, and chanted his name. For many, it wasn't just politics anymore, it was personal. Kennedy had given voice to the frustrations and dignity of millions who felt overlooked. Across the nation, a shift was undeniable. The so-called Kennedy surge had evolved into a political revolution. Pundits who once dismissed him now admitted he was a contender who could no longer be stopped. The establishment had tried every weapon in their arsenal, mockery, smears, coordinated attacks, and every time, Kennedy emerged stronger. And it all began with one insult meant to belittle him. Hillary Clinton had called him a dumb hillbilly. But his response didn't just stun the room that night, it stunned America, and changed the course of political history. In the weeks that followed, Kennedy's movement transformed from rallies and trending hashtags into something deeper, an undeniable cultural force. Everywhere he went, crowds doubled in size. His words were quoted in classrooms, churches, union halls, and family dinner tables. Politicians who once ignored him now scrambled to appear beside him, hoping his newfound popularity might rub off. The establishment, however, realized it was too late. Their attempts to smear him had collapsed under the weight of his authenticity. Each attack had only strengthened his bond with ordinary Americans. What was once called the Kennedy surge had hardened into a movement no strategist could control. Hillary Clinton, once one of the most commanding figures in American politics, was now overshadowed at every turn. Her insult, the moment that was meant to diminish him, had become the spark that elevated him. Commentators openly debated whether she would ever recover, while Kennedy's star continued to rise. At a massive outdoor rally, tens of thousands waving signs, chanting his name, Kennedy addressed the nation with words that felt like the closing chapter of one story and the beginning of another. "They tried to mock us, they tried to silence us, but they forgot something," he said, pausing as the crowd quieted. America doesn't belong to the loudest voice in Washington, it belongs to the people. And as long as I stand here, I'll never stop fighting for your respect." The crowd erupted into thunderous cheers, voices carrying into the night sky. Reporters described it as a defining moment in modern politics, the rise of an unlikely leader who turned an insult into a revolution. History would remember the insult. But more importantly, it would remember the response. Kennedy had left America stunned, and changed forever.